The basic garment for a wealthy late Roman soldier is an embroidered tunic, which was likely an influence from the Eastern Roman Empire, but gradually it became more popular in Western Europe by around the late 3rd century onwards. Long-sleeve tunics were becoming more common in everyday clothing, and would continue to be a staple of clothing style throughout the entirety of the medieval period. Brass greaves are worn to protect the legs. By this time, the large rectangular scutum was no longer used, and the Roman military were mostly using round or oval shields. Ironically, the Roman Empire began with spear and round shield, and despite over 500 years of military evolution, it ended with the same spear and round shield. Large-scale battles were not as common by the 5th century, and certainly not in Britain. Instead, small skirmishes made up the majority of combat experience for these late Romano soldiers, so fighting in cohesive units was not required anymore. Usually solo fighting was all the soldier needed to learn. The Roman soldier wears an undertunic, which provides a layer of padding before the main piece of armour is worn. This features decorative elements, such as tassels on the shoulders, as well as a variety of bright colours which shows a level of wealth and status. A lorica squamata is worn as the main piece of body armour. This is a shirt made up of thousands of bronze scales, and was a style of Roman armour that continued to be in use after the lorica segmentata had fallen out of use. The male variant, named the lorica hamata, was also in use during this time, and gradually evolved into a more simple male shirt rather than the previous Roman style, which had flaps going over the shoulders and hooked on the front to provide an additional layer of protection. By the 5th century AD, the spatha had taken over from the gladius as the new favoured sword type of the Romans. Likely due to the fact that the shields had become smaller, a soldier could now no longer rely on hiding behind their shield to get in close and deliver a quick, accurate thrust with a sword, so now they had developed tactics which included melee combat at a bit more of a distance with the use of longer sword blades. The spatha was originally used by the Roman cavalry, called the equitae, as the additional length of the blade allowed them to reach the infantry below. This spatha is a reconstruction of a 5th century feltwell artifact, which was found in a Roman hypocaust. A wide leather belt is based off a find from Dorchester in England. A helmet is worn to protect the head. By this time, helmets had changed quite a lot from the previous classic Roman Gallia style. Now they were of a Spangenhelm construction, which means multiple plates which are riveted together by the use of metal bands. This was an easier method of making helmets, as you could use smaller plates. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire in around the 4th or early 5th century, dependent on how you classify what constituted the fall, large industries that the Romans had built up across Britain were now incapable of continuing to function. As such, a reliable and constant supply of iron and steel was no longer obtainable, so the Romano-British had to forge their own metal items, since trade with mainland Europe was also heavily reduced. So the use of smaller plates to make Spangenhelm helmets became more common throughout the 5th and 6th centuries, and indeed these helmet types were also adopted by the Saxons as they began to migrate to Britain during this period as well, with the most famous Anglo-Saxon helmets such as the Coppergate, Sutton Hoo, the Wollaston and the Shorewell all being a Spangenhelm construction. As previously mentioned, the shield was now round or oval in design, with this patternwork being similar to the famous yin and yang, but this pattern adopted by Roman culture was completely separate and appears to predate the Chinese symbol. One reason for the adoption of round shields is that, by the late Roman period, the military were relying more on hiring Germanic mercenaries who brought with them their own weaponry and fighting styles. The spear used is called a hasta, and was by far the most common weapon on the battlefield. They were simple and relatively cheap to make, using far less metal than a sword, and were more than adequate since armor was less prevalent among soldiers during this period. The colors used in this kit are all available in this period, and we do know that later Roman period armor favored brightly colored clothing and weaponry. Lorica squamata had been in use widely around the Mediterranean for many centuries. It was popular with the Greeks and the Persians of the antiquity, as well as soldiers of the Byzantine Empire over 1,000 years later. This was certainly a more expensive style of armor, and most Romano-British militia of this period would likely own a helmet, spear, and shield with no body armor. I would like to give a massive thank you to the Longthorpe Legion Roman reenactment group who helped make this video possible. Please support them by following their social media in the description below, and be sure to attend their incredibly authentic living history events to help keep this wonderful hobby of historical reenactment thriving in British culture for generations to come.